Hello and welcome to the Funk Chronicles. I'm your host, Dr. Turk Logan from Logan Communications and the Funk Museum Hall of Fame and Exhibition Center. Today we have a very, very special guest and a dear friend of mine, and we're going to Skype him and talk to him, Mr. Thomas Lockett, formerly from the group Slave. And I'll see if he's here with us so we can chat.
What's happening? How's everybody doing?
I'm doing well, my friend. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm doing what I got to do to, make things happen.
Well, I hear that you're living in Atlanta. There you are. How you been?
I'm all right. I work in second shift, so, it's a little early for a brother, but I'm here.
Hey, I tell you, we all got to make a living. We got to eat, don't we?
Yeah, I got to keep this figure going.
What are you doing now?
Other than working with some artists down here, I've only been here, me and my wife moved here in August. I'm doing a regular, 9 to 5, which is something that I believe is necessary unless you have the bank account, to speak for it.
I understand.
I'm working with some local artists here. There's plenty of talent here in the area, and me and Charles Cito Carter, we are still working together actively. And probably within the next 60 days, Dayton, Ohio, and the rest of the world will hear some of the things that we're working with right now.
Well, that's excellent. That's excellent. And I want you to keep me in the loop of that when you get ready to release as well, so we can
Definitely
make sure that we give you some airplay on our radio station. Definitely. Let's talk about a few things before we go into the history. Right now, we've been working with a very prominent organization here in Dayton, Ohio, the Funk Museum Hall of Fame and Exhibition Center, chaired by the president and CEO, Mr. David Webb. And part of what we're doing here with the Funk Chronicles is a offspring of that. How important is it from you being an artist aspect that we put something in Dayton, Ohio to represent some of the things some of these great artists have done in the past 30, 40 years?
It's very important. A lot of people who live in Dayton or from Dayton don't really realize the awareness around the world that Dayton has. It's been a great footprint for many decades. The Ohio Players kicked it off from the west side of Dayton as far as their style of music. Slave quickly followed along with Roger, Zapp and all that. But the museum is something that is needed. I think it's an excellent, excellent idea and concept. And I really appreciate David stepping up to the forefront to make this thing happen.
And that's what we need to hear. We know we're going to make sure we have your support and other members of some of the groups that are from the Dayton, Ohio area. Let's talk about your early beginnings. I remember when I was at WDAO, a certain young man by the name of Mark Adams brought me a cassette tape. It was a white cassette tape, and it had a song on it called Slide. and because of the Ohio Players and Roger and Zapp and Lakeside and Heatwave and other groups, I had developed a relationship with a lot of record company presidents. And one was a dear friend of mine by the name of Henry Allen. I'm sure you remember him.
Yes, definitely.
And as a sidebar, his cousin lives in Springfield, Ohio, sent me an email just a few days ago. Was getting ready to write a story, maybe even try to do a movie about Henry. Henry started with humble beginnings at Atlantic Records in the as a stock clerk, and then became the president of Cotillion Records. Well, yeah. I sent that cassette to Henry, and a few days later, he called me on the phone and said, "You wouldn't believe what I did, Turk." And I said, "What did you do?" He said, "We didn't have cell phones then, but he had a phone. He didn't even have a phone in his car, so he was on his way to play golf." And this is a story he told me. He said he pulled over to a phone booth and called you guys and signed you guys over the phone. And that was the early beginnings of Slave. And I said, well, just make sure I get a gold record when the record goes gold. And it went gold, and I got my gold record. And that was the early beginnings.
Awesome.
Talk about some of your experiences with the group.
You know, Turk, we were so young, um, 17, 18 years old, really didn't understand the business. We knew that we loved to play. We had the support of our parents for our instruments. We didn't have any true life cares at the time. Um, of course, at the time, Steve Washington was the leader of our band, and he was actually living with Ralph Pee Wee Middlebrooks at the time. So we went to New Jersey, uh, not really having much studio um, experience. As a matter of fact, we had no studio experience. While a lot of groups would practice to go do live shows, we only practiced to write and produce songs and prepare ourselves to record. Um, that was what we did.
Right.
So we just went at it from a totally different perspective. I think we only played in Dayton one time. We played April Fool's Day of all days at Roth. And that was our first show and pretty much our only show in Dayton until the record came out.
Right.
So it was just great. And there are so many memories. We could go on longer than what this program is going to allow.
I remember one thing, Thomas, that will just have you just, you said until the record, when the record came out, you came home to perform at the University of Dayton Arena.
Yes.
And you were on the show with the Commodores. Yours truly had the honor of emceeing the show, that's how I know. And remember the helicopter that was rented? And when when you guys got in the helicopter from, then it was Stouffer's, and came, which would have been monumental if someone had accounted for that the show was sold out, which was nobody's fault, but I'm sure everybody was glad because you guys was a homecoming. But then once the helicopter realized that they couldn't land in the parking lot, they had to turn around and go back and then come back in the limousines. And you guys had an opportunity once you finally got on stage to perform your signature song, Slide. And that was just phenomenal, man. And I just had the greatest time with you guys back then.
Well, you know, it's almost like a blur, even while we were on stage, to come full circle. And again, at such a young age, we had just left Columbus uh, either the day before or a few days before that, outdoor concert. It is something that you never forget. Sometimes when I walk around, I sit, I have to pinch myself and say, did that really happen the way it happened? And yes, it did. It was a learning experience that I treasure to this day. The ability to become number one across the country, both the single and the album, was something that is just mind-blowing. The thing that many groups have been able to channel and continue to do is to maintain their presence in the industry, and that's one of the things that I've always admired with Zap and other groups. So I just aspire to continue to work in my craft and keep the movement alive.
Well, you know, it's like you said, Thomas, and ladies and gentlemen, we're talking with Thomas Lockett from Atlanta, great member of the group Slave on the Funk Chronicles. And it's like what you said, though, you know, when you are a teenager, and it's almost like winning the lottery, and you have come from humble beginnings, and maybe even less than that. Many of us came from the hood, from the projects, And so, and then all of a sudden get thrusted into the limelight of major entertainment on stage with groups like the Commodores and Earth, Wind and Fire and these major groups, and making that kind of money to go along with it. It's kind of overwhelming, I'm sure it is. I've seen it happen right here in Dayton with many of the groups, yours included. And it's not a criticism, it's just the fact that you go from nothing to something, and there's not been an in between to show you how to deal with that when you get to that point. So yeah, I understand, and peaks and valleys, a lot of bumps and bruises along the way, but you got it done though.
Yes, and I mean, we were guided. Our manager at the time, Jeff Dixon, was a program director, which was ironic. He was one of the vehicles that helped us along the way to get to Henry Allen. As you know, being a program director, being involved in a radio station, that you have that communication, you have that relationship with record company presidents. So we were ready to do it as far as being naive. We loved to play. Our only real love was playing. Whereas a lot of times, and the same thing happens in Hollywood, you don't truly understand the business. When the record came out and it was playing everywhere, and someone says something about publishing, I was like, we're not doing books, we're doing music.
Understand, that's what I said, understandable.
Yeah, so it's been a full circle thing that has transpired, and to this day, uh, we, the members of Slave that are still vibrant, are still dealing with issues from that very first contract that we signed in 1976, you know, trying to um, uh, recoup monies and recoup other things from the record companies. So it's a business, and that's the first thing that I can suggest to anyone that's getting into any type of artistic thing, is to study the business and read up and speak to people who have already been there.
And I'm sure you, just like you said, I'm sure you are teaching the young artists that are coming up under your tutelage the same thing, because you're right, it's called show business. And many
Show
times,
business.
again, it's not a criticism, it's just what happens, and Slave was not exclusive to it, because it's happened to so many groups across the country, around the world, time and time again, and probably still happening today. You know, they're musicians. They could care less about contracts and publishing and things this nature. All they want to do is get on stage and perform. And
That's it.
again, and that's what was going on back in the day. We lost two members here recently, Drac and Mark Adams, and pretty close together, one in Columbus, Ohio, and one in Dayton, Ohio, and they're two of the original members. Tell us about your relationship with both of these guys.
I don't remember not knowing Mark Adams. I don't remember a day in my life that I didn't know him. It was, you know, I grew up on Dandridge in Dayton, and Mark was on Charleston Boulevard, and so was Floyd. We were childhood friends. Um, we were lunatics at the time. I mean, music was something that we started from grade school as far as learning how to play our instrument. I started on clarinet. I had sisters who played clarinet, so I was handed the clarinet. Um, we had our music class at Gardendale Elementary, and that was our introduction. It wasn't until later on, 5, 6, 7 years later, did um, the guys say, "Well, you know, we're forming a band. We're getting involved." And in the very beginning, Mark Adams played lead guitar, rhythm guitar,
Okay.
and Mark would have been an excellent guitarist. But what happened as we were um, making this transition and contacting guys in the neighborhood to form a band, um, it was discovered that the other guy had been playing guitar a little bit longer. So
Let me
Mark
ask you.
is
Let me ask you a quick question. When the band was formed, like so many groups, did you start out with the name Slave, or was there another name?
no, we started out as the Young Mystics. The
Okay.
very first group that we did was the Young Mystics, which consisted of three of the original members of Slave, which was me, myself, Floyd Miller, and Mark Adams.
Okay.
So we started with that. When we um, began to form the group that became Slave, we first tried to call ourselves Congress. And, we were looking for an identity. And, we called ourselves that, but it really didn't hit with us. It's like, well, we got to call ourselves something. And I never will forget that Floyd Miller came into the rehearsal place one day and he had on a T-shirt. I don't know if anybody remember these T-shirts. On one side it would say Slave, and on the other side it would say Master. And the moment he walked in with that T-shirt, we all said, "That's it."
So that's where the name came from, then, huh?
That's where the name came from.
Okay. All right. I was going to ask that question, and I know people have asked me over the years, and that was something I couldn't directly answer because I knew a lot about the group and had worked with the guys and things of this nature, but I never knew where the name came from. So that's good to know.
Right.
So
And it
go ahead.
wasn't just a name. Um, we were at the time smart enough to realize that it wasn't just about picking a name, but the concept that we believed in was that we were all a slave to the universe and slave to our lives, and we had an obligation to make sure that everyone was held accountable for themselves. So,
Okay.
that was our concept at the time.
What about Drac? When did Drac join the group?
What's interesting is, and it wasn't until even this past year uh, that I realized Drac was the person who actually put the group together.
Okay.
Drac put everything together. He made the phone calls. He was already in school at Colonel White uh, with Steve Washington. He reached out to us. We thought we had interviewed him to play guitar with us, but it was the opposite. He was interviewing us to go with him. And the other thing that was ironic, we had already had some rehearsals and a few months had gone past, and there was this one particular evening that Drac came by my house, and I said, "Well, how you doing?" And he said, "I'm good." And I said, "Well, I can't leave with you now because I've got some family here from Detroit." And he was like, "Really?" He's like, "I've got family here from Detroit too." That's when we discovered we were cousins.
Okay.
And we were actually close cousins on both of our mother's sides. So, it was an eye-opening experience with that. But Mark was, all of us, I will say, we were creative in our own rights. And what made Slave special was we allowed everybody to be what they were. And we didn't play everything, quote, musically correct, but we vibed together. And that's how we made things happen.
Well, I have to say this, man. You guys were and still are, those of you that are still here, so talented. And I mean, all the way back to pre-grade school, grade school, high school, the ones that went to college and right into your professional life, was so talented. Where did all that talent, or where did your talent come from?
Being around all of the acts, all of the guys in Dayton, it was just what we did. I mean, my father worked at General Motors. He worked at Inland, and so many other uh, guys from different groups. Parents, Dayton was a GM town, as you know,
Right.
and we were able to get instruments that maybe other kids in other cities were not able to acquire the way we were.
Sure.
And again, I go back to it was the Ohio players who were a little bit older than us. They had already reached a high level of musicianship. They had
Sure.
been playing for years while we were still in grade school.
Correct.
So seeing them and me personally going to Ralph's house and uh, Pee Wee's house and seeing how he was living his dream of living well through playing music.
It was contagious.
It
Exactly.
was it was contagious, and that is something that to this day there are other young people in Dayton that are still aspiring to reach those heights. So it's just something that we all knew if you weren't in a band, if you played an instrument and you weren't in a band, there was something wrong with you, which is why there were
Well,
so many groups to come out of the city. It was just what we did.
exactly. You know, Tom, we could sit here and talk all day about just the group Slave, but, you know, as life treats us, we're running out of time. But would you come back again and talk to us at a later time and keep us posted on what you're doing and some of the history of the group?
I would love to. Again, I am here in the ATL. I miss Dayton though. You know, Dayton, Dayton is a special place. But I am here now, and I'm working with some young artists here, and I promise you within the next few months, you will be hearing from us.
Tom, thank you very much for joining us on the Funk Chronicles. I'm your host, Dr. Turk Logan from Logan Communication and the Funk Music Hall of Fame and Exhibition Center. Thank you, and join us again. Bye-bye.